Hi, I'm Ginger Rankin with Izzy Herriette Co, and today I'd like to take just a few minutes to share with you some insights as to why we use the props that we use a lot of times in our ministry. And I'll tell you about these little gowns hanging behind me. And I know those of you who are familiar with the ministry, you follow us on Facebook, or you've read any of my blogs, you're going to be familiar with this site. And so the explanation for this today is that when I was called aside in 2004 to receive revelation from the Lord on perils that were to come on the earth in soon coming days, God began to show me, I had an arousing inside me for these antique little gowns and such things as these old shoe forms. And I didn't realize at the time why this was happening to me. As a matter of fact, I got a little bit fearful about my spiritual condition because I had just prior to that given these things up. And now I was out buying them again because there was such an intense thing in me for them. I did realize right away, though, as I was shopping, and I just continued to buy more and more of them, I began to have a little bit of a vision and a little bit of knowing, quite a knowing, that this was not something that was happening in my flesh person. And so later, when the revelation for the book came, God began to connect the dots for me supernaturally. And here in the end, come to find out, I believe this was God's maneuvering me to purchase these all along because He knew what would come in days to come. So these little gowns represent another time, a time in our history. We had people who actually wore these, who created these and wore them long ago. A lot of these are very soiled, and I left them that way intentionally because they do show the time and the wear. You know, our country and God in particular was showing me that there's a generation that used to exist. And if you go back to Adam in the garden, this is specifically what he's referring to. There was a certain kind of a generation there. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Genesis 1 and 26, 27, and 28, where God said to Adam, "Be fruitful and multiply." It says there that He created man in His image and in His likeness. Well, you know, friends, that was a certain likeness that He created them in His likeness, in His image. And God was telling them to go forth and to begin to propagate that image, to always keep that likeness in a continuum. And if you'll notice in the scriptures, just before God created Adam, He created all of the animals. And it points out over and over again in the scriptures, God says, "And after their kind made He them." Well, there's man, and man is made after man, after man, after man. But there's also a man that's made in the image and the likeness of God. And today, when we look at these little gowns, or we look at the wooden shoe form, and this has a greater meaning than what I'm going to share with you today too, but we have walked far, far away from this, what these little gowns represented at one time. I believe that there was a generation that was close to God. There was a generation that cared whether they walked after the footsteps of God. And I believe that as we look across the earth today, and according to the revelation poured out in me in 2004, it is a definite fact that we're moving away from that generation. You know, when you say the word generation, you may think from grandfather to father to son to grandson, and those are generations. But God once again was speaking to me about a generation in that if I go to the grocery store and I find a particular item that I really like, and they have a stock of that item in the store, and say they have 100 of those particular items. Well, when those items all sell out, they have to go and get what you might call another generation of that item. And this is what God was talking about with me and sharing with me. And you know, our country today, people in this day, we're not generational minded, God said. We are not God generational minded. And again, God wanted that likeness, His likeness and image, to repeat itself. Well, you know, friends, I have a real burden in this day and hour because I see us slipping far, far away from that generation that God had in mind, that He wanted to see go on and on and on and be reproduced. So I'll just go ahead and tell you also about this wooden shoe. This wooden shoe represents a form. You know, when you put this in a shoe, it's for the purpose of keeping that shoe in a certain form, is it not? And this is what God was showing me in these wooden shoe forms, is that there is a form that God had in mind when He created man. God did not create man with in mind that man would turn to evil ways and destructive ways and destroy one another and get into hatred and bitterness and envy and all of the fruits that the Bible refers to as the fruits of the flesh in Galatians 5. Well, friends, we're just moving, it seems, further and further. Again, I'm repeating myself. Moving further and further away from what God had in mind. So just to give you a little bit of insight today why we use these things, and we'll talk about these more in videos to come, but we hope you're having a good day today. Take these things and just let them mull around in your mind a little bit and pray over these things and ask God to show you what message He is really and truly sending forth to His people in this day and hour. Ask Him to give you the revelation, to touch your heart, to fill your mind with His thoughts on this day, quote unquote, this day. And if you follow me on any of my media, you will see that over and over again, because this, God told me, is a particular day and hour that we are in. So we'll leave you with those thoughts for this time, and we're glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time right here on Trunk Treasures with Izzy Herriette Co. God bless you.